Hello Tech Genius, I am Ravi. Have you ever imagined a place where learning is as dynamic as the technology shaping your world? Then here's a deal. With iMatix, you can make sure the learning is exciting, impactful right from the beginning. You have interactive sessions with expert-led courses. In the world of tech, from data science to cloud computing, it's not just about a session, it's about doing, building, learning by solving real problems. So let's get started. Generally, there are multiple ways of terminating an employee. It depends upon organization requirements. Can employee go to their job change and then simply now assign the kind of termination activity? That is one thing employee can do from there in the firm. They can go to the job change process and trigger NC process, and all that is one way. And managing also will be having permissions to actually terminate an employee. Job change, you can do that from termination task. That will be there then also. You can do most of the areas. It will perform through job change. Here, employee can go to the job change and do the kind of option. There will be a kind of resign or exit or terminate kind of option will be there. Employee can go to job change and do this process, or if CHEFA or manager have to perform this one. This is a task, right? Terminate an employee. Even that will trigger the same business process called job change. And the task that I'm selecting will also look at the termination business process. Here they can actually, if HR or manager or anyone who wanted to actually take an action, they can actually go for terminated employee and bring that employee into the complete the transaction. Go to the BP termination BP. There's the business process that actually triggers. Here you can write some kind of conditions that if you don't want to have this termination Workday account to get disabled after the moment that termination triggers. And the second, by default, end of that particular day Workday account will get disabled. But here you can actually define some rules that you don't want to actually disable that account. Just expired that account to know what they will take care of that. And because in the US most of the organizations will be what they will be doing is once employee gets terminated, they wanted to actually give for terminated employee access to Workday to view their pay stubs, to view the tax information, and most of the US companies will take care of giving limited access, just to access their pay stubs, to access the W-2 tax information documents. All those things most of the US organization will actually give access. In that scenario, what you will do is in the termination business process, you will write a rule that that Workday account will not actually expire or disabled, that the particular date when your actually employee is getting terminated on that particular day, you will make a rule that Workday account will not get disabled, kind of rule that you will be writing that employee will not be able to, get into the system to actually access all the tasks, but will be giving some security. For terminated employee, you'll be giving us some kind of security only to view their pay stubs, only to view their contact information, chain activities. Only that particular thing you know that you do, but all other things in the by default will go off. The other thing that you do is for all the terminated employees if there is a case, but in general scenario that is not the case. The termination task, termination BP, which I've shown you, that should work for straightforward termination. In case if there are any kind of specific other transactions that you wanted to add to termination employee even after termination date, you will be there will be a security group called termination as self kind of thing. Terminate as self or terminate as self will be there a kind of security group where all the terminated employees will be a part of that, and you will be giving access to specific areas after termination. In the security group to which you will be assigning some specific permissions, you are using a lot of information, but generally it will not be generally contact information and pay stub information. The tax information and all can be there. At least will be giving access to change contact information because tax information has to be sent to their mailing address, right? Whenever they change their contact, will give access to change their primary address, that in work they will be having an access to change the contact information and view these pay stubs actually. Here you can see these are all tax related documents where we'll be assigning all these permissions to employee who actually view this tax related payroll information. Similarly, this is for Canada, but we also have for EOS also. EOS payroll things. We can actually assign the tax related documents, pay stubs, pay kind of paychecks. If they wanted to view all those things, we'll be assigning to employee. That will be doing as part of specific request. If your organization is following the process, you'll be giving that, and you'll be adding to the business process kind of rule that Workday account will not get disabled even after termination. Might be most of the organization will go for 1 year or 2 years. Just keep the account active but not disabled. Even if it is active, only specific transactions will be performed. One is contact chain. The other thing is viewing payroll information. Now, this case termination is a kind of first straightforward task which executes through termination business process. With that termination task, and there are multiple reasons of termination. One is employee theirself. They'll be applying for termination, which is nothing but voluntary termination. We call it as voluntary termination, where if manager or HR initiates the termination, that will be coming under involuntary termination, where poor performance kind of termination reasons would be there. Poor performance and absconded kind of lot of termination reasons. Involuntary termination reasons are there. We'll be choosing those reasons and terminate an employee. When you're terminating an employee, there are a lot of other questions will be there. Whether if we wanted to rehire an employee again in future, whether we wanted to, mark this employee, do not hide any time in the future kind of auction system will ask. HR will be selecting. If that employee is going under voluntary leave, HR will be making eligible for rehire kind of auction. If there is a kind of involuntary termination where it's a forceful termination by manager or HR, they are marking ineligible for heights. That will be in the system whenever employee applies again to that position or trying to rehire an employee. This flag right which we have flagged, do not hide again, this flag will be triggering that this employee has been marked, that do not hide. But you are hiding the kind of error message in it. Unless you remove that flag, you cannot again rehire an employee. That's a whole brief concept of termination. Any questions? Is that clear? Was it clear? Understood. Thank you. Any other questions anyone have? Any concept, business process or reporting, call fields, compensation organizations, anything that you're not following, you wanted to rediscuss or check anything. I know someone. Yes, like when we were trying to do to create one business process, myself and some members of my group faced something like we were redirected to a page where we have to enter something. I just don't remember, like it was a few days before resign. Not to reassign, we have to enter something like TAM, like some option was coming. Let me just check. I have my screenshot with me. Let me just check for that. I was just checking. Though we were trying to enter by giving something into the same, like we were trying to do with several options, but it was not accepted and we couldn't complete with approval step or something like that. What is the business process? It was like create position. Create position. You're trying to create position and trying to assign approval step. Yes, but it was not like we were not able to go through that approval step like in between, like when this option comes, though we tried. I don't actually remember, it was some day before, I'm just checking for the screenshot I get that I will be sharing. What happened is we couldn't complete that process because we just want to look like we have approval step. And before we get into that, have you used that default business process or you attached default business? No, I used default business process essentially. Let me see. I'm not finding the default. I'm not finding where the default was. You're able to find that business process. Just a second, I was. Let me just check once more, let you. If not, I can actually have this process within a supervisor organization and try to see. Approval execution. If you're not able to find, I'll assign the same business process to one of the supervisor organization and create a position and see how approval step can be configured. If that works for you, actually I'm right on my page where I created some positions and all the position remains on itself right now. And from here, when I was trying to do the same, like I tried to add a person called Neju Wilson to the position customer support technical, and it is awaiting action by some people. The first person over there is Abrit. I'm trying to approve from her side. Just a second. This is when you're hiring, right? After creating it, after creating the position. After creating a position, when you're hiring someone into the position, you got an approval step for specific business process reason. Had a business process. That is not a position business process. Position business process is nothing but when you're creating a position. When you're creating a position, let's say customer care, and it's something that you wanted to create under any specific. When you're creating that position, if you wanted to add any kind of approval shape, that it has to go for manager of the supervisor organization to approve the position before it gets created. You'll be assigning that approval step. I'll take one example here. The one that you're seeing on my screen. I'm taking this one just to show. This is not a default business process. This is something actually. It's already defined by someone else. You can see here initiation is there. Actually, if you wanted to add any kind of approval set for positions, hired business process is different that you're referring but specific to create position business process. If you wanted to add any kind of approval steps, you need to go to that particular business process. Create position business process. Generally, when you're creating a position, the approval should be from the supervisor organization manager under which the position is getting created. Will be assigning the approval, and if you wanted to have after manager approves, it has to go for further approval. Actually, I have a chart. Nobody create positions under the supervisor organization called 159 support. If you actually create any position under this one, this actually goes for manager approval. And once manager approves, it goes for HR approval. Create position. Business process can be configured if you wanted to have approval. But if you are asking us something after creating position, if you wanted to fill the position with any employee, and when you are trying to fill a position, that has to go to multiple business process is something you know will not come under this business process because you already created a position. And when you are filling a position, you wanted to have some kind of transactions specifically performed. That is something you can do in hire business process. When you're hiring the new employee, you can actually add certain business process conditions. How do you want to hire an employee? In what way the approval process should go? All these things you can actually do in hire business process. Take this as an example. If you don't have any kind of approval ship and just you have initiation step in the hire business process, the moment we actually submit hire will be completed. That is what we have done when we are hiring an employee. But if you wanted to add specific business process steps to the hire business process, you need to go to that hire business process and add the related steps that your organization would be requiring. Most of the steps will be configured in the hire business process. Let's say there are a lot of transactions that can be added in hire business process. If you wanted to actually assign any kind of probation period to that business process, HHR will be adding that probation period to an employee the moment employee joins the organization. if you wanted to assign any kind of compensation to an employee. We discussed it, right? Compensation package and all. If you wanted to assign that compensation package to an employee, you will be assigning compensation. Hires and comp, admin. Compensation administrator will be doing that one, and step D. If you wanted to get this approved once this compensation is assigned, let's say 15 lakhs would be one of the position that is getting hired. Compensation has been actioned. A compensation administrator has assigned the compensation. Now if you want often adding that compensation, if you need any kind of approval step to add for that compensation, you can actually add an approval step and assign the respect to security group who can actually action on that one. You will have to assign compensation partners to go through this one, and then step E if you wanted to add any kind of stocks to the employee. If the stock is restricted to only specific group of employees, you will be writing a condition here. He will be writing a condition. This step should be applicable only when employee job grade or management level is greater than director or greater 90 or 80. Whatever the job grade will be there. Let's say if only vice presidents are applicable for stocks. Now you will be writing a condition here only when job profile or only when management level is equal to vice president. You will be writing a condition that when this approval step completes, this business process step will look for the employee management level. If the employee management level is vice president, this will go for HR operations IT admin to assign a stock amount for that employee. If it is not a management level of vice president, this step will not execute. This will directly go to another step. And if you wanted to add after adding approval, sorry, here it is. Like that, you can actually extend higher business process. This is how higher business process will be configured. All the actions that you will be seeing are related to hire. Whenever employee gets hired into the system, these are all the things that you will be adding pay group, which country pay group that employee belongs to. You will be assigning the pay group. And if employee automatically the first day when employee gets hired, some benefit plans has to be assigned to an employee. These are the benefit steps that you will be assigning to an employee. That automatically the moment when employee gets hired into the system, benefit plans will be assigned to an employee. And if you wanted to have employee to assign personal information, the moment hire action completes, you will be assigning changeable personal information and you will be assigning this to employee. Employee will be getting a notification to enter their personal information and all. And most of the US companies will have I-9 form verification, like how we have our India ID authentication, like other or passport or any other government ID verification. Similarly, in the US also we have Form I-9 verification. That needs to be attached to the moment the employee gets hired into the system. you will be adding I-9 verification system, and you will find a lot of other steps. As for the organization policy, you can actually add these number of business process into the higher business and execute accordingly. Like, how can we add all these in specify? Like how I am adding. This is how we will be adding actually. This is how we will be adding, and the moment you hire into the system, all these steps will execute. Like for close position, we can find only one option in the specify, like generate document or something like how to. Is it like only one option will be there, or we will be setting it? If you are finding only one option in the closed position, I think that's maximum we will have only. Because when you are closing a position, what reasons you will be having if the budget is not there currently for the position? You wanted to close the position, or if the position is no longer required now, you will be closing the positions. There are no specific another reason that we can find for closing positions. If you don't want to close position, there is one more option, freeze position. There is another business process that if you don't want to close position and if you wanted to temporarily freeze the position, there is another business process. But if you are going for closing the business process, it's nothing but you don't want it to have the position to be available in the system. You should be seeing the position as closed when you are seeing the position in the system. There won't be any kind of multiple other steps that you can see for closed positions. You can see the generate document is nothing but the kind of when you configure this thing. When close position business process triggers, a document will be attached to whoever's security group that you're attaching here. It's a closed position. Only this option will be there, like no other option. No other option will be there. There are no various reasons that you can have right. Since you don't want to have this position to be available in the system, you're closing the position. And for closing the position, you need some kind of approval from manager or from any of the authority that this position is no longer required, because we don't want to hire this position for these reasons and all. They will be giving some kind of email approval to close the position. When this generate document step triggers to some of the security group, they will be attaching that email for closing the position. That in future, when you wanted to track how come this position has got closed, you will be checking this document that has been attached to the business process. Close the position. Automatically, when you configure the steps, whenever HR or whenever recruiter is closing the position, a document will be asked to them. You need to attach the relevant document to close this position. That they will be attaching the document and they will be closing it. If you wanted to make this as a kind of mandatory, you will be defining the kind of validation rule. Did we discuss something called validation rule when we were learning things? If you wanted to add any kind of validation rules to the business process, there is a task called Maintain Validation Rules. You need to go there and define some kind of validation school. I know someone was asking the error message that if you wanted to have any kind of error message to be triggered or warning message to be triggered, all those things can be managed in validation rules. You can actually add new validation and make your own validation here. If you wanted to do this validation kind of things, you can actually add to this randomly with the existing business process that I selected, but you can actually select the relevant business process that you wanted to choose and define this validation rule. That if you wanted to see any kind of error message or warning message on the business process, you can actually use this validation concept to do this one. You've been having the business process that are available currently in the system. But for positions, close position, that's maximum. You only have one kind of specification set that you can close. You can actually add the validation rule and attach the validation rule here for any condition rule that you're actually making. That when this condition rule executes any of the business process, this will trigger a severity critical that you're adding based on this. This will throw an error message. But if you don't want it to have kind of severity, you just want it to pass some information, you can actually select that kind of severity as a kind of information that you'll be able to make that as a kind of warning message. It should not in the selection list for vice president. Now, if you take that condition and add it here, and when you're actually, let's say for example, hiring, when you're hiring, stock grants are there. Now, when you select any employee who is not a vice president and trying to assign stocks, there should be an error message. System should throw. If you wanted to do such kind of restrictions, you can actually create such kind of conditions and add those conditions here. I have created one condition and I can add the condition here that whenever that is actually executed, you can add that condition to this validation rule. You can add that condition to this validation rule. And whenever that step executes outside of the business process or anywhere, this will execute and show critical error message. This kind of validation rule also you can actually configure based on your business requirements. But closed positions will not have multiple options. You're just closing positions. You hardly can add an approval step. Who has to close the position? Who has to approve for closing the position? Kind of options that you can do. But you don't have multiple options to close the position. Any other questions anyone have? You're good far onto the calculated fields. You're able to follow or you're missing anything that you do not understanding. You need to have some kind of a rediscussion on that particular topic. Reporting and calculate, which are very important. If you are actually looking for a kind of demanded position, these are demanded skill set. For having calculated fields, reports, integrations, technical knowledge. If you wanted to be in a kind of a demand and work deposition and the kind of unique skills set, you need to have proper understanding on the calculated fields, reports, security. Security is one more important thing. You need to be familiar and confident in actually the topics that we discussed. You will not see anything more than that. If you wanted to play around with something security, it will not be anything outside of what we discussed. Domains and business process for security policies. It will not be anything more than that. Similarly, reportings, calculated fields, whatever we're discussing are a kind of a typical use cases. If you know how to perform a kind of a transaction, where to use which function, then I think you'll be getting a good command or good kind of hands-on on calculated field and reporting concept, which can be helpful for you when you're playing around with integrations on specific calculations and all. You can define your own calculation as how you want it to have rather than depending upon work being delivered kind of things. You can define your own function, calculated fields to tweak the data from the report or from the data that is sitting in Workday. You can actually create your own kind of calculated fields for that and make it to work as how you want it to have. These are very much required things: calibrated fields, reporting, basic integrations, security. All these combinations are very much required and unique when you know all these kinds of concepts. Mostly people who are attending, who are trying to get into Workday, they'll be just restricted to core HR or business process or just a reporting or just integration. Security, I don't think no one can get into that, but here you're getting an option to know a lot of things. Know the background of a lot of things. Security part, we've seen how security can be handled with the role-based and the user-based. I asked to actually explore on job-based, which is similar to role-based. you must have got a proper understanding of how security can be restricted at role, at company level, at cost center level. If you get kind of hands-on that one, you'll be able to talk confidently of you manage the security restricted to each of the organization. And similarly, user-based security can be handled as how we want it to have and how you want it to play around with business process security policies. By assigning security to the business process transactions, you can do that. All those things are very much required skill set which currently in the market less people are aware of it. It's not that no one is having such kind of skill set. People who are trying to switch from one organization to other organization with 1 year or 2 years of experience might have this kind of complete understanding of all the concepts in Workday. But people who are actually getting into Workday as a new kind of career opportunity will not have this many kind of concepts. Whatever you're learning here, by the time we complete our last course, you will be having the kind of knowledge and we will be getting a kind of concepts that generally an employee in real-time employee who might have experience at least 2 to 2.5 years of experience, who might have learned all these things the same you're getting here. Employee in 2 to 2.5 years in Workday career, whatever they can learn, you're getting all those kind of concepts with the real kind of real-time use cases that we will be seeing. You will be getting such kind of exposure to the areas provided only if you're doing hands-on day-to-day basis. It's not that I've created a complete calculated fields. And next day, when asked how to actually do a kind of evaluation steps, if you're blank, if you're not aware, that's a different, You cannot understand that you cannot follow the process of calculation. But if you have a kind of good hands-on of handling the calibrated fields with the functions that we're creating, everyday evaluations, and probably in our next session we'll be creating complex calculated fields. If you know why we are getting the calculated, what is the purpose of that? If you're trying to understand and try to use your kind of related knowledge to see how calculated field can be functioned for this requirement. And if we get any kind of other requirement, what calibrated field can meet the requirements to get it done. Such kind of analysis you'll be able to make yourself when you know the concept. If you're not aware of the concept, you'll be not making decisions, you'll be not able to at least think how it works. Similarly, integrations will be getting an integration sometime after calculated fields. That is important and a hot kind of skill set integrations. People with integration knowledge, with report knowledge, with additionally, security and other functional knowledge like business process, organization hierarchy, maintenance and compensation related knowledge. All these are, you'll not find people with this complete skill set. It's a kind of unique kind of knowledge or skill set that you will be getting. If you are getting complete knowledge or hands on what we've discussed right from first session till the last calculated field that you have created, that will definitely help you to actually be in the top row of your, shortlisting or finalizing your candidate after completing your discussions. If you are getting complete knowledge, what we discussed right from first session till to the last session, you will be in a row of shortlisted candidate for further process because you are aware of how security can be managed. You are aware of how to add the business processes, how to make condition rules, and how to actually do the kind of action items in the business process, how to add condition rules, maintain validations, and all you are aware of this. Normally regular employee who is actually working in the workday, who will be doing all this day-to-day activities in their workday life. You are getting the kind of knowledge, and that would be a kind of unique skill set when you compare with the competition that is there in the market, or if you are actually in the position. This knowledge will definitely help you to grow further. If something is getting failed because of the security, if you know the underlying behavior of security related domain security policy and business process security policy, you will be able to understand why the failure has happened, what fix that you can make. You will be able to take the decision related to security if you are aware of the security policies. Similarly, calculated fields. There are a lot of calculations that we can make for calculated fields. We have seen for only half of the calculated fields, but there are complex calculated fields getting the data from related business object. When fields are multi-instance, how you can get that object into primary business object? Getting aggregations, getting count, getting sum. There are a lot of business processes. Sorry, calculated fields are there which would be important for you to understand. If you're having any kind of confusion on any of the concepts that we discussed, just to get those clarified, because once we are done with calculated fields, we will be getting in integrations. And once we are done with integration, we will be winning of the course. Before we close, that you need to be confident on all the areas that we discussed. Then only there will be a kind of opportunity for you to being confident on the questions that are being asked or any kind of requirements that you're getting. If you're already in the position, you'll be able to understand the concept and you'll be able to define or analyze the requirements and go with the build process. Thank you. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.